I'm Perumal Nagapushnam. I must keep my credentials before showing proof and reasons why global weather warming is the greatest fraud in humanity. I'm a green architect. I was dedicated to mitigating global weather change as an architect in the building design. But why the change now? 5 years ago, I spoke in a seminar for architects about the dangers of global warming and promised gloom and doom for all humanity. All the weather scientists and the media prophesied an end to the world. And I began to study seriously whether if this is true. And to my surprise, there was no sciences at all. And this is when I started what's going wrong there. We need to understand global weather change in brief before we review the 7 proof and reasons why the global weather warming is the greatest fraud. There are 3 aspects of it. Diagram 1 explains the global weather warming. The heat of the sun is absorbed into the earth, but cannot escape the atmosphere as the shield of carbon dioxide causes the heat to build up within the atmosphere, causing the ice in the poles to melt and water to rise. Furthermore, the rainwater are not falling within the catchment area, and our taps are dry, droughts and famines increase, shortage of water and shortage of food, and many will be dying. Furthermore, the temperature rises beyond 4 degrees above the temperatures of the world. As of 1880, methane gas at the bottom of the oceans will be released, and the global cooling, which is irreversible, will take place. That will end the world. Acidification. Lastly, an end to ocean life. The carbon dioxide in the air will acidify the water levels. Acidification. Lastly, the increase of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere will acidify the ocean. Ocean life will come to an end as all crustaceans, crabs, prawns, and all forms of shell life. And this will end to the life in the ocean beds. This is it, the proof and the reasons. Proof number 1. Carbon dioxide is a trace gas, which is 0.04% of the atmosphere. What is 0.04%? Let me explain how small that is. To explain how small the quantity of 0.2, see the diagram below, the proportion of 0.2 of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. Imagine a lady weighing 68 kilograms is compared to a Boeing 747-400. The lady represents the carbon dioxide, the Boeing represents the atmosphere. This is the proportion of CO2 in the atmosphere. The effect of the lady on the Boeing is marginal. This is what the 0.04% really means. This diagram here shows there are 5,000 dots which represents the atmosphere, such as CO2 and nitrogen dioxide and carbon and oxygen. The 2 dots represents carbon dioxide. The rest of the dots represents the other elements of the atmosphere. This carbon dioxide is really small, as I said, and this will have no effect on the temperature, neither the acidity of the ocean. Even if it is as an effect, its effect is marginal and none at all. The 3 other dots, black dots, shows the amount of new emission of carbon dioxide since 1880, the pre-industrial period. That is an average of 20 billion tons emitted every year since 1880. The traces of CO2 added is hardly an effect at all in the environment, both in the environment and the ocean. Again, the effect in any way is marginal. Now, this is my proof. The carbon dioxide is so small to have any bearing on the atmosphere and no way affects the temperature or the acidity and the ocean. Even if all of carbon dioxide as it is and as it were in this atmosphere were absorbed into the oceans, the effect would not be of any effect. It will still be marginal. Secondly, the carbon dioxide is heavier than the other gases in the atmosphere, and it doesn't rise up into the sky. It's heavier than oxygen, nitrogen. The position of the atmosphere is at the lower end of where the vegetation is and the trees are. Let me apply what I said earlier Here there are 2 diagrams. The left one is popularly used by weather scientists, and on the right-hand side by what I think is right. The right is the real situation, which I believe to be true. This is it. The diagram on the left shows that carbon dioxide is a shield deflecting heat, causing warming. And the diagram on the right shows the trace quantity for a small amount as it is, and the position is at the bottom. The first lie is the heat escape from the earth causing warming is a lie because the carbon dioxide is not in the clouds. It is not a shield deflecting heat because the quantity of carbon dioxide is so small it cannot deflect any heat. Second lie, the carbon dioxide is not in the clouds. In reality, most of the carbon dioxide is heavier than oxygen and nitrogen, which is most of the part of the atmosphere. Carbon dioxide is really at the bottom of the universe, where the vegetation is or the trees are. Carbon dioxide is a life supporting. If there is no carbon dioxide, the vegetation and trees will die. Carbon dioxide is a fundamental element of human life. It's toxic. It's not dangerous. This is my challenge again to all those who contend against me. Carbon dioxide does not affect the world dangerously, and show me the data that carbon dioxide deflects the heat back to the earth. For this proof alone shows that the global warming movement is false and deeply flawed. It's a con job. It's coordinated propaganda by interest groups to cover up lies. Reason number 2. NASA's report and the UN's IPPC reports were falsified. According to Joseph Delio, NASA was caught falsifying the data to give the impression that there was a temperature increase, temperature warming. He said the number of actual temperature observation points used as a starting point for world average temperatures were reduced from 6,000 to about 1,000, which means to say that much of the world's temperature was not used in the measurement of the world temperature averages. In fact, the temperature readings were taken from urban areas and not even the hill stations to give a warming effect. Second, the IPPC report did not take into account of the effect of the moisture in the air, which has a greater effect on temperature than carbon dioxide. Carbon dioxide have no effect on the temperature, and hence the weather models used by IPPC were grossly incorrect. The data is rubbish in, rubbish out. IPPC report did not go through the procedural requirements of the peer review process. Federicis wrote in his article in Wall Street Journal in 1996 that this was wrong. Something's wrong is really wrong out there. There is a deep undercurrent of interest, powerful groups to influence NASA and even in the UN for their interests, as they are massive propaganda with deeply flawed logic, obscured by shrewd and unrelenting propaganda. Now let's look to reason number 3. 31,000 scientists reject the global weather warming and say that no convincing evidence that humankind will cause global warming. Moreover, there is a substantial scientific evidence that increase in the atmosphere carbon dioxide produces many beneficial effects on the plants and animals and environment of the earth by Leonard Hartwell, the U.S. Department of Agriculture, Gainesville, Florida. However, others such as Olive Hamilton in 2002 claimed that the climate scientists have twisted the results in support of the climate change theory in order to protect research fundings. And John Coleman in 2007 claimed that the global weather warming is the greatest scam in history. Get some bearing right. With 31,000 scientists having rejected the global weather warming theory, with the UN and NASA at the bidding of these powerful interest groups. Now, let's go to reason number 4. The experiments conducted by the global weather warming scientists is a fraud. The acidity test was conducted by the global weather warming scientists were faked by adding acid into the test. And Dr. Willie Soon, a physicist, found that carbon dioxide, when increased in the water, actually helped the crustaceans get bigger and sea life improve rather than degrade. He said that there is no experimental data that supports the view that the Earth's climate has been changed in a dangerous manner. And the climate models cannot simulate real situations. Hence, the temperature from the models are not accurate. And models should not be used in policy making. NASA's reading of the water levels If NASA's data for temperature rise has been fabricated and spurious, the same can be said of water levels. We need to see the data. My simple logic is the seawater level supposed to increase way back in 1977 when Exxon first talked about water rising levels. And if this was the case, by now, Singapore and Malaysian ports would have long had a problem, but which is not the case. We have not seen the increase of water level. Another simple logic sense is that water melts at the melting point of 0 degrees, not because there's a drop of 1.5 degrees or increase of 1.5 degrees. Again, where is the data? Is the melting of the seasonal melting been misinterpreted for global weather change? There is no data. Again, the propaganda and the money trail is so obvious. Assured and unrelenting propaganda enables a coalition of powerful interest groups, convincing everyone in the world that carbon dioxide from human activity is dangerous. Now, leading to the money trail. Reason number 5, the money trail. All weather climate activities created a foundation to raise funds. That's interesting. Really, do they need to create the funds for what? Should not they take not as their own personal interest, but to let the government have? Should not this be the government initiative? All activities from Al Gore to Leonardo DiCaprio lived a luxurious life. The environmental issues stopped away from their homes. Al Gore, for instance, used so much energy that exceeded more than 20 other houses. Al Gore benefited from the weather policies and now is worth 300 million worth. DiCaprio rented a luxurious yacht, notoriously engaging many famous friends for parties in the Mediterranean Sea. Are these global weather warming activities not worried about the disaster ahead of them, trying to save the world and rather partying around? He himself is now worth 280 million. Greta, young woman, received 1 million as a child. The million is an opportunity to give angry talks to raise more money. If she could raise 1 million at her age, imagine another 20 years, how much she would raise. She said that people are dying. What about giving away the million that she earned for the dying people? James Hansen, the father of this all global weather change, spoke to NASA, spoke to Congress about the evidence using his climate model, which was a spurious one. It's now worth 17 million. Now come to reason number 6. False prophecies of NASA and of the UN which never came true. The temperature or the water rise in the level to the dangerous levels never happened. The islands are still there. The coastal ports still functioning. The earth did not explode into irreversible freezing, nor methane gas exploding into the sky from the deep seas. Droughts and waters did not rise. Food prices have not escalated. People are not dying. The children have been frightened again by the interest groups and deceived in a way to steal and rob. It's like a daylight robbery by interest groups. In conclusion, recently a building in Florida collapsed. The blame went to global weather warming. Again, scientists with no clue of engineering matters, instead of studying the matter closely, blame it on weather change. It's a shame when men not familiar with engineering matters or foundations come about and lying and making comments and blaming on weather warming. Let me end with a quote from Richard Lindsay. What historians will definitely wonder in future centuries is how deeply flawed logic obscured by sure and unrelenting propaganda actually enabled a collision of powerful interest groups to convince nearly everyone in the world that global weather warming from human activity, that carbon dioxide from human activity was dangerous, planet-destroying toxin. It will be remembered as a great mass delusion in the history of the world that carbon dioxide, the life of the planet, be a deadly poison. Richard Linson. The greatest lie with half-truths have been instilled. Fear on the younger generations, panic on the nations, trepidation among the people. They have powerful interest groups that have successful as the money trail points to them, and the amount at stake is 40 trillion. Signing off, Perumal Nagapushnam from What's Wrong Out There.